President Joe Biden was questioned in a recent interview on voters' concerns about his age and if he's really the only Democrat who can protect democracy in next year's election.
Concerns that many voters have about your age, among other things. Why are you the only Democrat who can protect democracy next year?
I'm not the only Democrat that can protect it. I just happen to be the Democrat who I think is best positioned to see to it that the guy we're worried about taking on democracy is not president.
Meanwhile, Biden also weighed in on government funding and the federal government almost reaching a shutdown, but his speech caused another stir among those who are concerned about his cognitive well-being.
I hope this experience for the speaker has been one of a personal revelation. I'm not being facetious. Anyway.
Many likened this incident to Senator Mitch McConnell's recent freezes. Not dissimilar, I suppose.
Like, on a human level, there's no part of me that enjoys seeing that. I mean, it's terrible. We just had Feinstein spend her last days, years in office in such obvious decline, and instead of spending time at home with her friends and family, she allegedly voted within 24 hours of her passing. And now seeing Joe Biden like this, seeing Mitch McConnell do the Mitch McConnell, I mean, it is really concerning. I don't think that the White House can continue to hand wave and poo-poo voters, the majority of whom don't want to see another Biden-Trump matchup, and the majority of Democratic voters who don't want to see Biden on the ballot at all. You can't hand wave that away. But that is sort of what Biden is doing in the earlier interview that we played when he says, it's not that I'm the only one who can protect democracy, but I am the one that's best positioned. Is that even still true when polls are showing a number of Republicans can beat him in a head-to-head matchup? Recent polls show Donald Trump up with 3 points against Joe Biden, and with more third-party candidates in the race, that the poll suggests that Donald Trump has even a bigger edge on Joe Biden. Now, of course, that's not conclusive. It can still be the case that Joe Biden could eke one out. And it's not necessarily true that a number of other Democratic candidates are faring better than Biden in head-to-head matchups. But the more certain it seems that Biden will lose to Trump, it does feel like there's more of an opportunity for Democrats to try something, anything in the alternative, and see if it sticks. Even if it only serves the purpose of showing the base that it does care about its, expressing its discontent about Biden, that it's not just going to ignore it the way that they did with Hillary Clinton in 2016.
Exactly, yeah. I think that the way that the people surrounding these individuals who are in Congress or in the presidency with no business being there, obviously not taking control and having these people step aside is incredibly sad. Jill Biden, the First Lady, should have, before he even announced his campaign, had a serious talk with this man about the issues and perhaps pulled him when it was clear he couldn't campaign from anywhere else than the basement of his Delaware home. And instead, she sat beside him and allowed it to continue and even cheered it on and sort of preemptively announced his reelection campaign before the president himself did so. And this is it's almost elder abuse, honestly, because when you have someone who is suffering cognitive deficiencies, the other side effect is that they themselves don't potentially have the wherewithal to know that it's time to step out.
Yeah, I will say that even compared to how Biden performed in 2019, 2020, this feels like a decline from then. And I would also point out that it's not just about age. There was this New Yorker cover recently that featured Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Donald Trump all in a race, a literal foot race with walkers. And a bunch of Democrats were upset about it for this reason or the other. But, I'm not offended by the cover, but I do think that there's a little sophistry in comparing Nancy Pelosi to some of these others. It's not just a straight age thing. Nancy Pelosi seems sharp as a tack. I strongly disagree with her from a political perspective, but the question with her age is that she's been in that position so long. That's my critique, not that she's cognitively unable to do the job. Regrettably, she's very able to do a lot of things I disagree with. But this issue with Biden has gotten to a really problematic point, and it does seem like this kind of far-fetched plan that people were speculating about, where Kamala Harris was going to be sent to California and Gavin Newsom was going to be slotted in as VP and standing there to replace Biden as like the younger version of him without actually having to run, is now off the table, given that Gavin Newsom has already appointed a VP to replace Feinstein. A candidate, not a candidate, a person to replace Feinstein's seat temporarily. So now we're just stuck with this?
I think two things can be true at once, and this is in line with what you're saying, which is that people can have legitimate reasons for thinking that people in Congress are too old or people in political power are too old. Mm-hmm. They want younger representation. They want representation, most importantly, that I think actually represents their interest, as opposed to lining their own pockets with insider trading and corrupt deals with lobbying firms and massive speaking fees, despite not really having anything much to offer besides I sat in Congress. Mm-hmm. While also saying that just being old is not necessarily a disability.
Right. In
the case of Biden and McConnell's freezes, I think that obviously rises to a different level than just they're older. That being said, I wanted to bring up the Axios report from, I think it was last week, about how the Biden campaign is terrified that he's going to fall or trip on the campaign trail, to the point where they actually have him in physical therapy to improve his balance. He's been wearing sneakers more often. And yet his staff publicly will repeatedly say, his spokesperson, Andrew Bates, will always downplay this and say that the president, everybody has a hard time keeping up with the president. He's so vigorous. And people who are concerned about this are essentially conspiracy theorists, and yet privately behind the scenes are doing everything they possibly can to prevent this guy from suffering a major embarrassment on the campaign trail. And it's just so fundamentally dishonest.
Yep. And I do want to pick up on your earlier point about that it's not just age, it's about how much you reflect the interests of your constituents. The youngest, millennial, the first Gen Z Congress member, Maxwell Frost, has been getting dragged on Twitter over the weekend for voting to restart the student loan payments, even though majority of voters, 54% of voters support student debt cancellation, and even more, obviously, younger voters in his actual age cohort support that policy. So yeah, it's not just age. It's not about the number. It's about the ability to do the job and how much you're actually representing your constituency accurately, and it does feel like Joe Biden is failing on those across the board.
Exactly. There's also been reports blaming his advance team for some of these issues, like not moving the sandbag that was next to the podium at his Air Force Academy commencement address, and basically, I guess, not keeping invisible rocks to trip over out of his path, and not properly telling him where to go when he's leaving FEMA headquarters, even though he's been there probably a dozen times throughout his career in politics. But I do think that, again, behind the scenes, the Biden team seems to be panicking a little bit, because there was a recent presentation that they gave to donors where they actually suggested that Florida was a potential pickup state for the president. If he is going up against either Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis, who both are incredibly well liked in Florida, Trump won Florida in both 2016 and 2020. He lives there now. He's a permanent resident and votes there. If that's the level of desperation that they're reaching, that they truly are trying to sell big donors the idea of winning Florida, things are probably worse than we even think.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. All right, stick around. We'll have more Rising for you right after this.